students are pursuing a master's degree in non-proliferation and terrorism studies, and each of them has a very, very unique background, and each of them is going to share their experience, why they are interested in this issue, and how come they decided to study non-proliferation issues. So I'm just going to give a very brief background of each student, and you can also find their full bio on this book. So first, Tom Gray is from Colorado Springs. After graduating from Rice University with a degree in anthropology, Tom was commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Navy and served aboard the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, the USS Alabama. While on board, he supervised the Radiological Control Division and the Strategic Communications Division. Now, next, Lily Vaccaro is finishing her first year at the Montreal Institute. She's a research assistant for Dr. Avner Cohen and the education program at the James Valley Center for Non-Proliferation Studies. Her research interests include multilateral treaties in the non-proliferation regimes, U.S.-Russian relations, and Russian policy. She has a Bachelor's of Arts from Beloit College in International Relations. And finally, Margarita Colon is originally from Puerto Rico. Margarita obtained her bachelor's degree from Florida State University and double majoring in international affairs and political science with a concentration in Japanese language and culture. She studied in Sendai, Miyagi Prefecture, where the Tohoku earthquake happened, and from October 2010 until September 2011 as an exchange student. She is particularly interested in nuclear energy and security issues in Northeast Asia. And she is, in addition to Japanese, she is fluent in Spanish, French, and Italian. So each of them is going to give about 10 minutes presentation. Then I would like to open the question. So now stage is yours.
Great, thanks, Misako. I don't know if it'll be 10 minutes, but I'll share briefly with you my story, how I got into proliferation. First, I want to thank Misako for letting us be here to share with you guys our stories. I think it's a really great opportunity. I'm really happy that we could be here, really grateful to be here for this opportunity. So you've probably already been told bunches of times how incredibly lucky you are to be in this position to have this opportunity, because it's one that's, at least I never had when I was coming through high school. I think it's a really, really great opportunity. Now, I doubt that all of you are going to go and study non-proliferation in the university or do it as a job, but I hope some of you at least will, and more importantly, I hope that after all of this, you'll talk to your friends about it, because I think that it's something that a lot of people don't really know that much about, especially at the level you're at, because I know I certainly didn't. And I know had I had the opportunity that you guys have, I think things may have turned out a little differently for me. So just give you a little bit of my story, kind of explain how I got involved in non-proliferation, how I ended up at the Monterey Institute. So about 13 years ago, when I was in the same position you guys are in high school, I was deciding what I wanted to do with my life, and I knew I wanted to go to university. And so I decided to apply. The problem was that I couldn't pay for the university, and so I decided to join the Navy because they agreed to pay for my university. At the time, it wasn't a big deal. Both my father and my grandfather had been in the Navy before me, and so it was a pretty easy decision for me. And after 4 years in college, I was commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Navy. But what I can say is when I joined, I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea what a ballistic missile submarine was. I had no idea what I would be doing as an officer in the Navy. And so I guess you probably don't either, so let me explain briefly what an officer does in the submarine Navy, because it's pretty specialized. So let's say that tomorrow President Barack Obama decides he wants to launch a nuclear missile. He's got a little briefcase with him always. It's called the nuclear football. And inside that briefcase, there are codes and everything he needs to launch a nuke. Essentially, he will input his codes and it will send a signal out all over the world. And that signal will come to my submarine down in the ocean. However, it doesn't happen automatically. When the signal gets to the submarine, it's encoded. And so it has to be broken by officers like myself, 4 of us actually. And so what we would do is the 4 officers, we would get together and we would break this code, and then we would all have to agree that the message was authorized and authentic, and at that point then we would all agree to launch the missile. Fortunately, we never had to do that, but it was a pretty big responsibility, and one that when I got to the submarine, I wasn't expecting it at all. It shocked me. I was not expecting to have the responsibility to launch a nuclear missile. And so, at first, my response, like most people, was to say, hey, it's never going to happen. Why should I worry about this? We're never going. We have these as a last resort. We're never going to use our nuclear missiles. And that's how I worked for the first 2 years I worked on the submarine. But then in the spring of 2010, I actually went to Japan to visit a friend of mine who was teaching English there. And while I was there, I went and visited all the big places. I went to Tokyo, I went to Kyoto, I also went to Hiroshima. And while I was there, I visited the A-bomb dome, which is the last standing building after the blast. And I visited the A-bomb museum. And it was an intense experience. We all study, in the US, we study World War II history. We studied what happened in Hiroshima, but actually seeing the photos, hearing the stories from the people that lived through it, it made it real for me in a way that had never been before. And so when I came back to the submarine, suddenly being in that position where I had the responsibility to launch a nuclear missile, it meant something completely different to me. But I don't consider myself a pacifist, and I had taken an oath to the US Navy that I would do my duty. And so I did for the remaining 6 months I was on board the submarine. After that, a couple of years later, I actually got out of the Navy, and that was when I decided that I wanted to study non-proliferation, disarmament, that I wanted to try to keep the next generation from having to go through the same thing I did. And that's how I came to the Monterey Institute. It's, as you may realize, there's very few places in the world that are focused on this issue, and Monterey is one of them. And it's funny, as I've learned more and become more knowledgeable about this topic, I've learned how much more work there is to be done still. We've made tons of progress. You look at where we were in the 80s, and there was 80,000 nuclear weapons around the world, and where we are today, less than 1/4 of that, less than 20,000 nuclear weapons. But that's still more destructive power than we would ever need. And that's why we need people to continue to do this, to continue this work. And that's why I'm so happy to see all of you here who are studying this or who are interested in it. All I can say is, keep studying, keep working, because I want to work with you guys in 10 years when you're getting out of college and you're coming to do this as well. And most importantly, tell your friends. I wish that I had a friend who'd come to this sort of thing when I was in high school, who could have told me, what this all meant, because I think it would have changed things for me. Thank you.
So thank you for letting me be here today. I'm, like Tom, very excited to get to talk to all of you. For me, A major part of my high school experience was Model UN. It's part of why I got into the study of international relations, which eventually brought me here. And I think it's very cool that there exists this program today for high school students to hone their skills, their written and spoken skills, on a topic as complex and specific as this one. So congratulations to all of you for being here, and thank you for taking part in such an important program. A few weeks ago, Moscow asked me to talk at this student panel, and I started thinking about what I would even say. Essentially, she wanted to know how I got from point A to point B, what brought me to the Monterey Institute. And at first I thought I would talk to you about how hard I studied in grade school, which turned to how hard I studied in high school, which turned to how hard I studied in college, and that my rigorous academic mindset is what brought me here today. But you've probably all heard that a lot. And so instead I started to think about the emotional reasons, the less tangible reasons that brought me here today, which is frankly not a subject I discuss very often. So I graduated from a very competitive high school in Chicago, Illinois, and I moved to Beloit, Wisconsin, which I had never heard of before, for undergrad at Beloit College. And I'm very excited that there are some people from Janesville here, which is just the town north of Beloit. And one of the reasons why I chose Beloit College was because the courses were taught by professors themselves, not by their TAs. It has an incredible international relations program that I'd heard a lot about before. And the biggest motivating factor was that I met my professor, who turned out to be my advisor when I went there, when I went to visit the summer before my senior year. And I mentioned to him my interest in Russian policy, and he spoke to me on the subject and other subjects of interest to him for about 2 hours, just out of his own free time, just because he was excited to meet a student who was passionate in something that he was passionate about. Then, when I started Beloit College, there was a course which many of you, if you go to continue to do college or university in the United States, will come to look at with a lot of annoyance. You have to take a lot of core requirements. And the nice thing about Beloit was that they were a lot more flexible than some schools tend to be when it came to what core curriculum courses you took. I was majoring in international relations, it's the humanities, and eventually it came to my having to choose a science class to take, which many poli-sci IR majors do not enjoy. But I had always really loved math, and therefore I always preferred physics of the other sciences. And then there was this course called The History of Physics, which just seemed golden to me at the time because it was more of a history class than a physics class. And I went to speak to my advisor about taking this course, and he warned me that I might regret making that decision once the course started. Apparently, many IR majors in the past thought the same thing I had, that it would be a really fun way to do science without being too sciencey. And apparently they were all very upset when they got into the course and realized it was very math heavy. There were a ton of labs you had to do, and at the end of it, for an intro course, you had to write a 20-page paper. He then told me that in addition to all of this, a lot of students complained because he had the tendency to be a harsh grader, and that a lot of people were put off by his dark sense of humor. And that fact at the very end was what convinced me that no, I really wanted to take this class. And so I did. The professor who taught it, Pat Polly, was a 50-year-old Vietnam vet with PTSD and a quirky habit of flipping through his rosary while he lectured. He had been very moved by his experiences in the armed services, and the subject of nuclear weapons was a very passionate interest of his own. Even though he became a physics professor, the reason he taught this history of physics course was because he wanted to provoke conversation about the use of nuclear weapons and what surrounded the development of nuclear weapons. And it was during this section of the course that he gave a lecture on the effects that radiation poisoning has on the human body. He went through the different levels of radiation poisoning, and he, not dramatically, without photos, described what happens at each level of radiation poisoning. And I got up and I went back to my dorm room and I closed my door and I cried. Because I had never really thought about what something like that could do to a person. The pictures are very convincing. The science, what happens to your body, is also very convincing. And it sparked this interest in nuclear nonproliferation that had not existed before. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit today about disarmament. It's a topic that Tom and I have discussed personally quite a bit. And actually, yesterday we were talking to each other about coming here today and speaking, and I made a joke about how I should probably sit and tell you all that disarmament's not likely to happen. And he said, well, we could play good cop, bad cop. And then he joked further and said we could play Sagan versus Waltz, which some people will get. Scott Sagan and Kenneth Waltz are two very well-known academics in this field. And they published a book that I am recommending to all of you today, The Spread of Nuclear Weapons, An Enduring Debate. And I recommend it for two reasons. The first is that if you do pursue this field, this study, you will have to read this book eventually. So you might as well do it now while you can. And the other reason is that both of these people are extremely convincing. Scott Sagan, who argues that the existence of nuclear weapons presents an inherent threat to humanity, and Kenneth Waltz, who counters his argument by saying that more may be better. That the more nuclear weapons we have, the less likely we are to result to conventional war. And most of you are probably appalled by my 10-second summary of Waltz's argument. Well, I was appalled the first time I heard it, before I actually read it. And it's a very significant work to read because both are extremely compelling. And it's very hard to decide who you side with at the end of reading it if you're really reading it carefully. And that's a big part of this field. And it's something you should know now if you go on to pursue it. And I say this because I was raised a pacifist. My father instilled my moral compass in me from the day I was born until the day he died when I was 12. And when I first seriously started thinking about a career in nonproliferation, frankly, it upset me quite a bit because my father had taught me the morals of pacifism from such an early age. He taught me how important it was to respect human life and human dignity. And frankly, nuclear weapons are a threat to that. It was a very difficult debate for me to overcome internally. I felt like I was turning my back on him by pursuing a security field. I thought I was turning my back on him by reading people like Kenneth Waltz and being swayed. And when I applied to Miis and other schools, when I knew this is what I wanted to study, even after I sent in my applications, I thought, maybe I just shouldn't go. I spoke to my mom about it eventually, and she told me, well, if your father was really that offended by you wanting to pursue this, it would have been very hypocritical because he became a painter when all his father wanted from him was to become a pharmacist. Which made things a little bit easier. And eventually, this internal debate became something that I really value in myself. And I see it in other people, and I really value it in them too. Disarmament is a very lofty goal. Pacifism is also a very lofty goal, and unfortunately, as idealistic as it is, as wonderful as it is, we're not there yet. I think it's great that everyone is here and is so passionate about this subject because it just means that a younger generation than mine is going to continue this effort, will continue to strive for a world where disarmament can be likely, where the person sitting in this seat maybe 10 years from now will say, I heard a master's candidate speaking about nuclear weapons and she said disarmament is not possible in her lifetime. and you can say, I decided to prove her wrong. And that's what is so special about, and so unique about this study. And I see it in my colleagues, I see it in the scholars working in the field. You have to accept the realism, but you don't have to give up your idealistic principles. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me in the panel, Masako. Thank you so much for pulling all of this together. You're a really Wonder Woman. And thank you so much. Let me go ahead and say it right now. You have all impressed me so incredibly much with your presentations and your understanding and your interest at this point. It's something that it's so refreshing to see and to hear, and I just can only hope to continue seeing more of this. My story, each of us has a unique path. None of us have Lily and Tom and myself, we all have different paths where we got here, and mine was through, I want to say, the gateway was languages. From a very early age, I mean, I was born and raised in the island of Puerto Rico in the Caribbean, and I mean, we really in the educational system, elementary and intermediate, we never really dealt with international issues as like we had social sciences, history, but nothing that would allude to nuclear weapons, nothing that would talk about history with nuclear weapons. And so when I had the chance to move to the United States and actually learn English the proper way, it was definitely an eye-opening experience. Just the school system, how you were taught everything differently here. At some point, I ended up going to Florida State University for my undergraduate, and I remember in the summer of when I was 19 years old, I did an internship in Washington, D.C. with an organization that dealt with South Asia and Near East issues, security issues and cooperation issues, and my basic job was to chaperone, organize sort of discussions, panels, symposiums where scholars and diplomats from these different countries would come and would talk about the different regional issues, security issues. And the one, I suppose, the moment where it kind of was like a bing for me, like, oh my God, this is what I want to study, is when we had an Indian delegate and a Pakistani delegate start getting a little bit, you know, not so happy with what the other one was saying about each other's nuclear weapons program. It was an interesting discussion, and it ended peacefully, but within these remarks that they kept saying to each other, I just became instantly curious. I was just incredibly surprised by the amount of detail with this word, nuclear weapons, that of course I had heard before. I had taken a class on it before, but nothing like seeing it there, living it with people day to day, how they have to deal with it in their jobs. After I finished my internship, a couple of years later, I had been studying Japanese at the university, and the opportunity to study abroad came up in Japan for a year-long exchange. And then when they told me, oh yeah, there's a city, it's in the northeastern Tohoku area, it's called Sendai. And I was like, okay, sounds cool, I want to go there, I want to study Japanese culture and language, it sounds amazing. I went, and I studied, and I met so many wonderful people, and then March 11th came around, and the earthquake hit. And that week, I happened to be visited by two of my very good friends So we were in Tokyo, but the particular day of the earthquake, we were next to, in an adjacent mountain to Mount Fuji. We were doing some sightseeing. So we were in a mountain when it hit, and just gonna cut down on the details, it was a very scary moment. I had never gone through an earthquake like that before. You had the little tremors, you had, I mean, it's you know, you felt something before, but nothing like that. And it wasn't even at the full 9.2 where we were at. But I remember it took about 5.5 hours to how it usually took about 1 hour to get down the mountain. We had to stop every time there was an aftershock. I spent the night at a shelter. We spent the night at a shelter. And then the next morning, we heard the word Fukushima. It's a problem, something's going on. And at that point, I had no idea what was going on, but until our university sent for us and they said, you can't stay there. You can't stay there, you can't go back to Sendai because of the Fukushima Genpatsu, the nuclear power plant issue. So I went back to the United States and I ended up signing a paper saying that the university would not be responsible for us, and I went back to Japan. And I was able to witness firsthand how much this affected the communities around the Fukushima area. Every day, march and protest, not only just against nuclear weapons, against nuclear energy. In Sendai, this was a daily thing. Every day, fat people, regular, you know, your age, my age, everybody, just marching outside because you were living with this fear constantly that radiation might get to where you were at. Sendai is not that far away from Fukushima when you think about it. It's only a little bit further up north. I remember many people boycotting tea, boycotting not eating any rice, not eating the area milk, the milk in the area. It was just an incredible effect, and this is what ended up solidifying my interest in nuclear energy and nuclear energy issues that come from this spectrum. I have always been interested in Northeast Asia and specifically regional cooperation issues and, you know, the regional dynamics in the area. My experiences in Japan and with the amount of languages that I've been able to learn as much as I can and continue learning, hopefully, I feel have helped me grow not only as a person but as also a student. And for all of you that want to get a job in the future, which I hope is everybody in this room, I encourage you to explore all opportunities, explore all pathways. I'm a big proponent of learning and solidifying your language skills. I think it's an incredible door opener, and it can help you not only understand other people, but it's sort of like that window into the other culture. If you know the language, you know the culture, at least half of it. Within this field of non-proliferation, it's not easy. Like my colleagues Lily and Tom have expressed, it's definitely one of the most complicated issues that our generation has faced, and it will continue facing. I am hopeful and very happy to see you young kids. I can't believe I'm saying young kids. I thought I was, you know, okay, I'm young, no, but you kids are so interested in this, and it brings hope, and it brings me so much happiness to know that all of you are interested in this. And even like what Tom had emphasized before, even if it's just because you're a little bit interested, not necessarily because you want to get a job in this field, but because you are interested in these issues, spread it around, talk to your friends and families and neighbors and anybody you know about this, because I guarantee you this is going to continue to be a very, very big issue in the international arena that affects you locally, wherever you're at. Energy will always be on the top list, always. And so will, at this point, nuclear weapons, nuclear energy possibilities, and just do exactly what you're doing right now. Stay informed, and you know that if you ever have any questions, you have a support network here. You're meeting all of these wonderful people. You're making new friends that you're going to carry on to back to Japan and to Russia and to your respective high schools here in the United States. So continue to foster these connections, and I think Tom, Lily, and myself are happy to answer any questions that you have for us. So thank you.
To encourage students, especially from foreign countries, if you have any questions, or even teachers or anyone. Any questions? Please.
To Margarita, I have a question. So, what do you think that dropping nuclear weapons and the nuclear reactors accident have in common? So, like, what point do you think are similar things or influence? So, yeah.
Thank you for your question. It's an interesting question, and the first thing that comes to my mind is that initial fear and that initial expectation that people have. How much do I remember of traveling in the bus when I was going down that mountain, people legitimately worrying over the effects that, oh, I'm hearing something is going on in Fukushima. There's a nuclear power plant though, right? Oh my, do you think the radiation is going to be as bad as it used to be? I think this highlights an important point in terms of you can never have too much safety precautions put in. Japan being one of the world's most technologically advanced nations, I would dare say the most well-equipped to deal with nuclear energy and nuclear energy components, nuclear energy issues. And this happened, and even to date, there are still so many issues facing the nuclear power plant problem, and there's still no necessary end to see, not to mention the long-lasting radiation effects. I feel that in terms of being prepared, the international nuclear community should always pay extra attention to things like this, like these accidents, like what even happened in Chernobyl. And in terms of that link in common, it's just, you can never tell what necessarily will happen. And that underlines the level of dangerousness that there is when dealing with nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. You can never be prepared enough. So I just stress that security component in all of this.
I see. Thank you.
More questions? Please.
I'm Mariko Sato of Yokohama Senior High School of International Studies. I'm very interested in nuclear energy, nuclear power plants. So I personally, with my colleagues, I went to Fukushima Prefecture 2012, and I joined because, from curiosity, I joined the assembly of the manifestation and protest against nuclear power plant of Fukushima people. And I was so astonished because by their angers, the farmers, they shouted that, how can we make a living? Because they can't cultivate soil anymore, and people don't buy the products anymore. So they were so angry, and I was so surprised. I was so moved by your remarks. And personally, since Japan has a lot of earthquakes, and these days we have 2 big earthquakes in the Pacific region, Indonesia and Fukushima, and Great East Japan earthquake, Richter scale 9.2. So I personally, Japan can exist together with a nuclear power plant. Japan has 54 nuclear power plants in our land. But I want to listen to your opinion because we have a lot of earthquakes, huge, big earthquakes. So, and once accident happens, it will influence to the ocean, and it will flow to all over the world, or it will flow into the sky, and from the jet and the flow of the air, it will circulate all over the earth. What do you think about the nuclear power plant that exists in Japan? We have a lot, and please think about it. We have a lot of earthquakes.
I'll respond here briefly. And obviously I am not terribly familiar with everything that happened on the ground in Japan. I would say that Margarita has a much better understanding of that than I do. What I can say is that there is no perfect solution, unfortunately. The world needs energy, and it very well may be that in Japan's case, nuclear power is not the right answer based on earthquakes, based on everything like that. But one thing that I can say that to keep in mind that is always an issue is that the other forms of energy out there, oil, gas, they have issues as well. And people have to mine coal. There's accidents involved with oil and gas as well. And so it's a matter of looking at which one is going to be the worst. And I don't know that there's an answer at all. I think the only answer is to consume less energy so that way we don't have to use any of it, so we can use renewables. But is that a reasonable answer? Is that a realistic answer? Probably not. In which case, I think what it's a matter of is trying to use what we do have and trying to do it as safely as possible. And that's my opinion.
So in my view, the problem with the nuclear power plants is that they do produce radioactive wastes. These radioactive wastes can remain in the environment sometimes for 250,000 years. That's a long time. That's a lot longer than carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And they are very, very damaging. And so I think that we should all think about that because I remember back in the 70s when they were trying to dot this country with nuclear power plants, and it came to California, and there were a lot of us who fought the nuclear power plants being built all over California. And I remember at that time being told, oh, they're going to have a solution for these radioactive wastes anytime now. That was the 1970s. And this is what, 2014? And we still have no solution for storage of high-level radioactive wastes. And we have had many leaks in this country. Hanford, Washington, 200,000 gallons of high-level radioactive waste soaked into the ground. I mean, it's serious stuff. That's my 2 cents.
Oh, yeah, please.
So see, we face lots of hurdles when we speak about nuclear energy, especially as new use. And so my question is about alternative sources of energy. Do you think that it's possible to use maybe more alternative sources of energy to avoid risk of radiation and risk of maybe nuclear explosions? Is it possible to use more alternative sources of energy nowadays? So we see that there's a lot of information about it on the internet about alternative sources of energy. We understand that we can't think about that we can't use nuclear energy. So we should use it, yes, okay, because it's so necessary for nations and for development of the countries. But what about the alternative source of energy? What do you think about it?
In terms of alternative sources of energy, I feel it's a very well-researched field right now, and it's early. I feel early in its stages. Clean coal energy, geothermal energy, for example, harnessing geothermal energy. I feel it is a very good alternative in the future, hopefully in the near future. Currently, nuclear energy is becoming more and more popular amongst many countries, even though it has its very serious risks, as we've seen with several examples, such as Fukushima. I think that in order for alternative sources of energy to be effective, to actually have a more widespread implementation, it's not only gonna take, oh, country A wants to do this, country A, we're gonna invest a lot of money into this, and it's gonna happen. That's just one step. I feel one thing that a lot of, sometimes many people might not consider is dynamics with other countries that may provide the resources in order to achieve these energy alternatives. And in order to have these resources imported or exported or whichever, you have to conduct appropriate cooperative measures with these countries. You have to also not only hopefully harness clean energy possibilities, but also harness a good relationship with countries. I emphasize the role of cooperation amongst countries very much because this is essential, and even though it might seem as an elementary thing to sort of say, okay, well, yeah, if two countries cooperate, of course it's going to be better, but when it comes down to the core issues, a lot of times people forget the basics of that, and it's something that you see daily. So in terms of new sources of renewable energy, I think they're in the making. I think it's going on. It's going to take more time to be able to brand it correctly in order to use it adequately. But it's a whole nother field, and I feel that, I mean, what do you guys think?
I'm actually just here to talk about nuclear weapons. No, I mean, this is a great conversation, and we all have it in our personal lives. It is, again, we do focus our studies on nuclear weapons, and I really don't feel comfortable talking to you about the nuclear energy aspect because I'm not an expert. It's a topic that we get a lot of wrong information on, and I encourage you to seek right information, but frankly, I don't feel comfortable talking about it. Thank you.
What I would say, the advice I would give for students who want to understand the advantages and disadvantages of these alternative sources of energy is two things. One, do your homework. The thing is, a lot of people, especially scientists, the ones who are going to be able to help you make a difference, the ones who are going to create these new forms of energy, they can't get these ideas out without the policymakers, the people who are going to go into government to help them. And but you have to understand them. And if you don't have a good background in science, if you don't know how the stuff works, it's like speaking two different languages. So it's really important that you have that good technical background, that you understand what the people are saying to you. And secondly, it has to make sense economically. And that's, I think, one of the challenges to a lot of the other alternative energy sources is that nobody wants to fund them. No one is, because a lot of times they're not going to make sense for investors. And I hate to say that, and it's really sad that's the way it is, but the only way that we're going to get alternative sources of energy, wind, solar, is when they can compete with oil and gas. And right now they're not able to compete generally, and I think that's a big thing, is that being able to make that leap and explain why these alternative sources are a good idea economically. That's something that's going to be very important for anybody who is interested in non-proliferation and is then interested in trying to explore those alternative sources of energy.
It's not there yet.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really great to hear your personal experience, and as you may have heard, that each of them has a very different background and a different view, as you heard from Lily. And some people believe in non-proliferation, some people believe disarmament. And today we had lots of different presentations, and each of you has your own opinions. And when you encounter a completely different opinion, it's very important to have a strong background, and also you have to respect others, what they are talking. And I really hope today's panel was very useful. And if you have a time, you can stay a little bit longer, but I know you guys are busy. But if possible, I really hope that you can continue this conversation. And I really like to express my sincere appreciation for these wonderful students.